From the EPR Creation Studio, this is Jason Staples bringing you the Unconquered podcast, or Unconquered with Doc Staples, scorching hot takes edition. I am starting this episode with 4:29 left in the fourth quarter, as Florida State is down 28-13 against Boston College. And I'm beginning this under the assumption that Florida State is going to lose this game. It is 2nd and 10 right now, but really, I don't see a whole lot of reason not to go ahead and start this episode. And hey, if they manage to win it, I've got it on my iPad in front of me while I'm recording. So, I'll get to see it, and you'll hear my reaction change a little bit as this goes on. But I see no reason really to work my way further into the evening and cost myself more sleep since I have to go to work in the morning. So, going to go ahead and talk about this one now. This is that's the season for Florida State in terms of their goals for the most part. The only way that they manage to have any of their goals go forward is to win out from here. And, quite frankly, this football team is not going to win out. This is right now, this is not a good football team. They've got a lot of talented players on this team, but this is just not a good football team. Now, before I say anything else, I want to emphasize that I think Mike Norvell is one of the best coaches in college football. That hasn't changed. I think in terms of his ability to get this program to where he did last year is a testament to how good a coach he is. I think he's one of the best offensive minds in college football. I think he has an outstanding sense of, and 3rd and 7, and Castellanos completely buck naked on an easy scramble, and that basically puts the game away. Amazing. But, again, going back to Norvell, I think he's one of the best coaches in the game. But I do think that the opening to this season puts Norvell in a position where he's got to evaluate every single aspect of his program from top to bottom, from which coaches are on staff and who should still be on staff next year, to, how they go about recruiting from here and NIL allocation and some of those things. This is the kind of start to a season that can be toxic to a program. And yeah, it's not good at all. I mean, to understatement here, but this is a football team that has that came into the season confident about two things: their offensive line and their defensive line. And in the first 2 games of the season, they got their butts kicked in what were supposed to be the strengths of this football team. I'm looking at it right now. Right now, with 2:25 left in the game, Boston College has 239 rushing yards and 274 net rushing yards when you take away everything else. 5.8 yards per play, and the vast majority of that, oh my gosh, and then just wide open down the field for a big gain, almost a touchdown there. So now 274 net rushing yards now, 5.8 yards per play, and that done right into the teeth of what was supposed to be your strength on defense. You got 4 guys starting that are supposed to be, first 3 round draft picks, and they look like doo-doo against the teams that you just played. They got it handed to them on the line of scrimmage. And then they got it handed to them on the line of scrimmage on the offensive side of the football too. So that in itself has to have you reevaluating a lot. And to be honest, the thing that was maybe most surprising to me about tonight's result, much of it was not surprising. I mean, go back to the preview episode, and I explicitly said I expect Boston College to average in the neighborhood of 5 yards per play, which they had until that last play. They were at 5.1 right until the last play there, that long run up the gut to get it down inside the 10 here on what will likely be their last drive. But, they were 5 yards per play for most of this game. That's exactly what I said to expect. I had Boston College scoring 23 points. That not surprising. I said they're going to come out with some things that are going to cause Florida State some trouble early because, this is a new staff and what they're going to bring in terms of wrinkles and all that. FSU is going to be scrambling. So, they're going to have to survive that first half. Said to expect maybe 14-10. That's that kind of thing. First half deficit to Boston College in this game, but then you have to recover and respond. Those were all things that didn't surprise me. What did surprise me in this game is the listlessness of this Florida State team, and in particular, the general lack of energy and strain. Strain is the thing. Like, it's the lack of strain from some of the guys that are supposed to be your marquee players, especially on the defensive line. So one of the things that really benefited this program the last couple years, last 3 years, is that the best players on defense were the guys that strained the hardest. So you go back to Jermaine Johnson. That guy played so hard every play, and it was contagious. Then you go to Jared Verse, and then the combination of Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, and those guys brought it every single play. And then you look at what they're trotting out there this year, and your best guys on the defensive line are supposed to be Darrell Jackson, Farmer, and Patrick Payton. And I have yet to see those guys strain like that for more than 1 or 2 plays at a time. The amount of coasting that I see on the defensive line is, quite frankly, shocking for a Mike Norvell coached football team. The thing, the most surprising thing is that this team, this game, looked an awful lot like a Willie Taggart team. You go back to the 2018 Virginia Tech game. That's the kind of energy that this team basically played with in this game. That's what it looked like, where there was plenty of yapping before and after plays. Guys were talking trash to Trayshawn Ward and Thomas Castellanos in the backfield after tackles for loss in the fourth quarter, and they're down 15 points. And you could see those guys responding like, scoreboard, expletive. And, then you look at, some of the post-play penalties and some of those things. This looks like a team that is rudderless and does not have any leadership, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. But this team does not have the player leadership that they've had the last few years. And that's the thing. If you want to talk about where they really miss a Jordan Travis and a Jared Verse and a Braden Fisk and some of those guys, the place where they miss them the most is very obviously right there. This is not a player-led football team. And that's it, 28-13. This is not a player-led football team. This is a team that looks like they need to sign some promissory notes, like what you saw back in 2017 under Jimbo Fisher. That's what this team looks like. Looks like a bunch of guys who got fat and happy, who have plenty of NIL money, and aren't really interested in straining and earning what they had. You look at last year's team, that team played hungry every week. Guys like Fisk and Verse played like they needed to go out and earn their paycheck, like somebody had robbed them and they were going to earn that back. This year's team is playing like they've robbed a bunch of NIL donors of whatever they've gotten. And they're fat and happy and sitting on that stuff. That's what it looks like. Now, there's a whole host of other issues that this team has to deal with in terms of other stuff. And that gets to questions about evaluation. And, I think this coaching staff badly uh, overestimated what they had ready to go this year. Now, I said after the snub last year that was going to put Mike Norvell in the hardest motivational spot that he has ever been in as a coach, because his whole pitch, his whole culture, everything was based on earning it, staying hungry, do your job, do the work, and the results will follow. And then that team went out and got basically shown that that's not actually true. You can go back to my immediate podcasts after that and talk. And I talked about that. I said, look, this is going to make it really difficult for Mike Norvell because of the kind of message that he preaches. And the question is, can he get these guys to buy back in to that approach? And I'll be honest, to date, every indication is that with these guys, with this roster, the answer is no. That he's not been able to get them to buy into the same kind of work habits and the same kind of strain that he preached before. This team plays like a team that basically says, well, doesn't really matter one way or the other. That's what they play like. Whether that's what they actually feel like, I don't know, but that's what they play like. So, that's one thing. The other thing, though, is that, I think that this coaching staff, and it starts with Norvell at the top, I think they did a poor job of self-evaluation in terms of self-scouting what they had this year. And we've talked about that in the past on this show, about how hard it can be in camp to really know what you have because of, if you're weak at one spot, it can make the other spot look really good. If you're weak at two spots, then you might think that both spots are better than they are. That can be difficult. It can be difficult to assess. But, this coaching staff had gone on a run of hits in the transfer portal and also in recruiting in general, where they recruited, they punched above their weight with some recruiting stuff as well, but they've absolutely punched above a sustainable hit rate in the transfer portal. And that's kind of come crashing down. They did not do a good job, or as good a job, evaluating and landing the guys that they needed to fill some of the gaps that they knew they had. And I think they had more gaps than what they thought they had as well. And then coming into this season, I think they felt like they were something that it turns out that they weren't. So there were a lot of misses in terms of evaluation, in terms of who they brought in from the transfer portal, in terms of how they've plugged those guys in terms of who they had remaining and what they thought they were. It's a very different team than I think they thought they had. And now they're going to have to go back to the drawing board. And as they go back to the drawing board, they're going to have to assess from the top down, which players should be out there. Do you continue to play old guys and 1-year transfers who aren't getting it done when you've got some developmental guys behind them that might need to play a little bit more? How long do you stick with DJ Uiagalelei? I'll be honest, I would have pulled him at the half, or maybe one drive after the half. I would have probably pulled him at the half. I mean, that's what I tweeted out, so I'll just say that. So, that you got to make that judgment. Do you play both young linebackers as primaries and, let those guys learn? Do you favor the young defensive tackles a little bit more? Do you play, do you start playing Tomiwa Durojaye and Daniel Lyons and KJ Sampson a lot more at defensive tackle? I think you have to. Do you start getting some of the younger talent out there at safety and just rolling with those guys? I think you have to. Kevin Noles can stay out there as long as he wants. That guy has been the one guy on that defense who has consistently been a baller this year. He can do what he can actually play. That guy has really played good football. He can stay and he can play as many snaps as he wants on my team. Offensively, you have to assess, like, Roydell Williams. I need to check the numbers on this. Pro Football Focus tracks this stuff, but I'm not sure he's broken a tackle this year. And look, if that guy's not breaking a tackle, and if Keziah Holmes and his opportunities isn't breaking tackles, you got to get Cameron Davis out there, and he's got to be your main back. I think Jalen Lucas can keep playing. But Cameron Davis, Samuel Singleton, Micah Danzy, those guys need to start getting a look. And you start bumping some of the transfers who haven't panned out down. Lawrence Toafili, you keep getting carries. He's earned it through his career. But you start looking at offensive linemen. Is it time for Lucas Simmons to get some reps? Jalen Early got some reps in the second half in this one and did not look good. And here, I'm going to say something that's going to upset some people, but for me, how should I say this? I have some real questions about Alex Atkins in terms of development and in terms of teaching basic fundamentals on some things. Some of the things that I've seen, and I broke a little bit of it down on the Robert Scott whiff against Georgia Tech. Some of the stuff that I've seen in protection from guys who've been in this program for 3-4 years, some of that stuff is just, it's plain bad. And for those of you who have not watched that, I'll try to explain as best I can on air without video. One of the primary fundamental things for an offensive tackle is to keep your shoulders square to the line of scrimmage as long as possible. You want to win with the positioning of your feet first and force any edge rusher to have to come to you first. And then with square shoulders, one hand at a time, work through that guy. What you never want to do is turn your shoulders horizontal so that you are perpendicular to the line of scrimmage and parallel with your shoulders to the sideline. The closer your shoulders get to parallel to the sideline, the more you have what's called in offensive line coaching a soft shoulder, a soft inside shoulder. Because what you have to do when you have those square shoulders, you have a strong inside post on that inside leg through that inside shoulder. And whatever's going to happen outside you can post up off of that inside, and that's your leverage. And so what you want to do is if you shoot your outside hand there, and then the defensive end, the edge player, knocks your hand down or wins with his hand there, you still have your inside hand that you can follow up with, and you still do that while turning your shoulders as little as possible and maintaining your leverage. The worst thing you can possibly do as an offensive lineman in pass protection, aside from really just not coming out of your stance and just terrible footwork in general on that, is to take your pass set and then turn your shoulders parallel to the sideline and shoot both of your hands at the same time. That allows any edge player to just sweep your hands and then take an inside release over that soft shoulder straight to the quarterback. We've seen that this year from this group. That should never happen to an experienced player. And then what we saw in the sack that Early gave up in the second half, he turned his shoulders completely horizontal to the sideline. And the other thing is when you give that soft inside shoulder and you turn your shoulder sideways, you also are reducing the amount of arc. You're reducing the angle that the edge player has to take when he's getting to the quarterback coming from the outside. So you're cutting that down, and that's what happened in this one. So those are just basic fundamentals. That should never happen to a guy who's been in a program more than 2 years. And that's happened back-to-back weeks for sacks from Robert Scott, who's a redshirt senior, and Jalen Early, who's in his third year in the program. That's a problem. Some of the other things in terms of footwork off the ball, I don't see the offensive line gaining ground. Generally speaking, good inside zone teams gain between 4 and 6 inches on their first step in zone, and then that second step is very powerful. You get those first 2 steps going forward, and you create a little bit of vertical displacement as well as horizontal displacement. This team was almost going in place with their footwork on inside zone. I don't understand it. I don't understand why that is. It's something that's bothered me. I'm coming out with it now, but these are things that developmentally, that fundamentally bug me on this team. The other thing is, when I look at who is starting and who has been developed in this program so far on the offensive line, Darius Washington has developed and has become a player. That was a Willie Taggart recruit. Maurice Smith was a Willie Taggart recruit. Robert Scott was a Willie Taggart recruit. Jeremiah Byers and Richie Leonard and Terrence Ferguson and Keandre Jones, all transfers in. But Byers has not really taken a step forward from what I could tell, although he was injured for today's game and looks like it's going to be for a while. And, of the guys that they've signed out of high school, you had a big class 3 years ago. And so far, really only Jalen Early of that class looks like he's taken enough steps to really be out on the field. And then when he got out there today, he got run right by with bad fundamentals. At which point I go, what's happening here? Why is a guy like Jalen Early or Julian Armella, why are those guys not taking that step forward in year 3? Year 3 is when you should expect to start seeing those guys start to develop. And why are there not year 4 guys? You've been on campus that long now. Why are there not a couple of year 4 or year 5 guys? I mean, Bryson Estes is out there, but have we seen him out there really? I've got some concerns here. And I've got some concerns at the defensive end position just because of recruiting. And, how much have Jermaine Johnson and Jared Verse just been guys that came and did it because they just worked their tails off and they would have succeeded. Now, look, I know I'm not supposed to say all this stuff, but, I'm shooting straight here, y'all. And you all know what I think about the linebacker situation, the linebacking core situation. And I wonder how much success are they going to have defensively under this whole defensive staff from the coordinator down? Now, look, I think you keep the cornerbacks coach no matter what. That guy, you keep. That guy has recruited, and the corners have gotten better and better under him in terms of coverage technique. Patrick Surtain can stay as long as he wants, and you give that guy a raise. But I think everybody else on the defensive side of the football, I think they need to be coaching for their jobs the rest of the season. And frankly, I'm not sure that in all those cases, they should have the option to keep their job at the end of the season. Odell, I think, has earned being able to stay kind of as long as he wants. But I'll be honest, the pad level from the defensive tackles has not been good the first couple weeks, with the exception of Daniel Lyons. So, take that for what it's worth. But, those positions need to be evaluated. And, I wonder what in the world is going on at the tight end spot in terms of the inability to read and block counter last week. And then this week, it was a train wreck. And frankly, I mean, Kyle Morlock, as far as I'm concerned, can go ahead. That's another guy that, maybe he needs to take a quarter of the reps instead of 3/4 of the reps and get Landon Thomas in there. Get, Amari Williams in there. Get the young guys some time, because at this point, you've got to evaluate where you are in your season. You got to evaluate what the actual realistic goals are at this point. And finally, this gets to, in terms of, who you want to play. You got to evaluate whether or not DJ Uiagalelei is the guy that you need to move forward with from here. You brought him in because you felt like he would be a steady hand that would help your team bridge the gap to a Brock Glenn or Luke Kromenhoek next year. But the product that we've seen the first couple of weeks, I mean, today, 21 of 42, 272 yards, a terrible interception. And, those are not good numbers, but the actual eye test in terms of what kind of throws he was missing. Guys, there were wide receivers wide open all night. This was not a situation where nobody was open. Go take a look. And I posted an example of it on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it now. I still call it Twitter. But go take a look. 2 plays before the interception, when he throws basically a dying brick at the feet of, I think it was Roydell Williams, who was pretty heavily covered as a check down there from the pocket. Y'all, the tight end, who is one of the primary reads on that play, was running a little bender over the middle and was completely uncovered. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm 42 years old. I've had 6 concussions. I might last 3 plays in that kind of environment. I'm making that throw from that pocket that he had in that situation, knowing that play. I know I can make that throw. And I know I can make that read. It's deeply concerning to me that your 5th-year graduate transfer quarterback apparently can't or won't. I think can't so far. That he doesn't see it and that he's going to check down. I mean, the fact that he didn't even try it. When there's a guy, I mean, Morlock didn't have anyone within 10 yards of him. Now, Morlock almost certainly would have dropped it based on what we saw today. But still, one thing at a time, just get the ball to the right spots. And that was the problem. That was a problem. But even when he did throw to completely uncovered guys, you've got complete airmails of those guys in situations like in the first half where you have a corner route where guys completely uncovered. And what I see from DJ there is he's throwing, they say throw it to the pylon. Well, DJ is taking that literally and he's just throwing it to the pylon. No, don't throw it to the pylon. That's a metaphor. You throw it to your player based on where he is in coverage when you're releasing it toward the pylon. But give your guy a chance to catch it. And that's something that, I mean, over and over again in this game, the out routes, Boston College basically decided at one point, we'll give you every outbreaking route you want to throw. We don't think he's going to make those throws. Eventually, he started to make them in the second half. But, in the first half, it was really rough on that. And second half was not so great. But, I mean, first half passing, he was 8 of 21. Second half, 13 of 21. Got into a much better rhythm after that interception, but the damage was already done. And what you have to assess is, with 2 losses in your first 2 games, and, potential to develop, do you let young guys make young guy mistakes? Or do you keep your old guy in there so that they don't get ruined? You have to make that assessment. And this is where I'm not going to say they absolutely have to go to Brock Glenn or Luke Kromenhoek. They have to decide whether putting those guys in these situations would be more likely to ruin them or to help them develop. And the moment that it would help them develop more, I think they might need to pull the trigger. Now, if you want to make the case that it's still too early for that on other grounds, you could make the case that, well, this team could still, in theory, with 2 losses in the conference, could still make the conference title game and win the conference. Mathematically, that's true. Mathematically, this team could still win the ACC and make the playoff, which, by the way, is one reason why the new 12-team playoff is terrible. A team that plays like Florida State has the first 2 weeks has no business being in the playoff. End of story. But they still could do it. Mathematically, absolutely plausible that a 2-loss team makes the ACC title game. And then, if they manage to recover, they've got the players and the bodies to be competitive there. But let's be honest, with what we've seen the first 2 weeks, this is not a team that contends for the ACC from here. This is a team that's fighting to get to 7 wins, maybe 6 wins. It's a team that, is going to have some trouble. So if that's the case, how quickly do you pull the plug and just say we're gonna treat it as a developmental year? This is a real rebuilding year, and you start to do that. How quickly do you start to go to Elijah Moore and LaWayne McCoy and some of those guys and Landon Thomas as a way to continue to build for the future? How quickly do you do that? The other concerning thing is, quite frankly, who do you have at edge, for example? Now you say, well, let's just let the young guy go in there so that he can be ready to go. You look down the list and you go Byron Turner. Well, he's a fourth year junior. Aaron Hester, he's really gonna be limited to more of a role player at that end position. A guy that you can bring in as a situational rusher more than he is a full time guy. Jaden Jones, who kind of looks like a bust so far, but he's been recovering from that knee injury that he had when you recruited him. So, maybe you give Jaden Jones some time. Boots, Lamont Green, still putting on weight, still developing, but I'm not sure, what his ceiling is. Really you have to go all the way down to true freshman D.D. Holmes before you say, okay, that's a guy that, developmentally moving forward to the future is a guy that you really build around. And, they haven't recruited well enough at that position that you even have options to play the young guys. I mean, I suppose one of the positives here is that if Peyton and Jones keep playing like they've played so far, there's very little chance that they, will realistically or should realistically consider going pro next year. So at least you might have those guys back. Similar with Darrell Jackson and Joshua Farmer. Those guys haven't played like NFL draft picks. But, if they keep playing like they've played, and you go into next year with those guys, then you have more highly paid, NIL guys who aren't worth what you're paying them. At least at linebacker, you've got bodies. And you got a couple guys in Nicholson and Cryer who look like they can be players. But, that's where you are. I'm going to go down the list, too, of, as I was mentioning, I thought they've missed on a number of the transfer portal additions that they made this cycle. And look, the percentages that they'd batted, in recent years, the hit rate that they'd had was unsustainable. There's no doubt about that. But, they've had more busts than not this cycle. So I'm going to go down the list of that. But before I do that, I want to thank my sponsors, as always, EPR Creations, bringing you the best of internet marketing and website development for an affordable price. Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida. He's a trained videographer and photographer. Nobody's going to make your house look better online. And look, most people look online first and then they go find their house. Luis is going to make sure that you get the top dollar for your house as a seller's agent. And then, look, if you need a buyer's agent to make sure that you negotiate things down and that you find the best places in the area, let them know you heard about them from the Unconquered podcast. Shenandoah Real Estate in the Research Triangle of North Carolina. Shenandoah Newsma there and her whole team, they're the best in the region for sure. Actually, were voted number one. She was voted number one realtor in Chapel Hill, in the Chapel Hill Carborough area. If you need a house or you want to sell a house in that area, you talk to Shen. She brings PhD level research and, has deals with, art galleries and everything else to make sure that your house is staged exactly right. Garage Makeover is the number one garage remodeling company in South Florida, and Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage, serving Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky. It's starting to get to be a good time to buy. Look at rates. Rates are coming down, and I think they're going to continue to come down from what I hear. And look, you'd be a fool not to give Justin Galloway a call and at least find out if he's what you want to deal with, if he's who you want to deal with. Going to make sure you get not only the best rate, but the best experience going through the difficulty of home mortgage and buying a house. So yeah, let them know y'all. If you go through any of these folks, let them know you heard about them from the Unconquered podcast with Doc Staples. Thanks for all that. Now, going down the list, let's look at the transfers. They took 17 transfers this cycle. First of all, I think you've got, I'm going to go through the guys that are hits, right? I think so far, Jalen Lucas is a hit. Malik Benson is, I think, pretty close to a hit. I think Sione Lolohea is what you expected to get there, so I'm going to call him a hit. I think Grady Kelly is basically what you expected there as well, so I'm going to call him a hit. Marvin Jones is more or less what you expected, but without havoc, so I'm going to call him an incomplete at this point. Beyond that, you start going down the list. The other three Bama guys, TJ Ferguson, Roydell Williams, Sean Murphy, If I had to grade right now, all three are busts in terms of what you were hoping you'd get out of those guys. Ferguson, the only thing he's given you so far is a unsportsmanlike conduct penalty that takes a 4th and 5 to a 4th and 20 and basically makes it so that you can't win the football game against Boston College tonight. That's the most you've gotten from him. Roydell Williams has not broken a tackle so far this year, as far as I can remember. Sean Murphy, complete bust. So your Alabama transfers, no bueno. Now, like I said, I think at least Malik Benson, positive returns there. He's been a good player. Has he been a number one wide receiver? Not really, but it's hard to tell with DJ so far. Omarion Cooper, well, you knew what you're getting there. That's not a bust or a hit either. Jacob Rizzi, unknown. Richie Leonard, I think he's a hit. He's been a quality offensive lineman. He's been your second or third best offensive lineman so far. I'd say he's been your third best behind Washington and Smith. Tomiwa Durojaye, he's if you're hoping for instant impact or immediate impact, he's been a total bust, but there's some stuff to build on there. So, for the future, I think you might have something there, but for this year, nothing. Devontae Brown, bust. Safety, the safety there. Earl Little, complete bust so far. Just wow. And then finally, DJ Uiagalelei, and that's been a bust. So that's not so good when you start looking down the list, and that's where you are with the transfers. You felt like you needed to hit on Marvin Jones being a player, not just a player, but a player, a dude. He's been a player, not a dude, right? You needed to hit on Lolo Hea being a good run stopper, and he's been okay. He's been fine. You needed to hit on one of your guards. TJ Ferguson needed to be a guy that you could rely on, and he has not been that. You needed to hit with Richie Leonard. He's been fine. And you needed to hit with one of your backers, and neither of those transfer backers has been good enough. But, the biggest thing is that this team ultimately came down more to DJ Uiagalelei than I think the coaching staff anticipated, and more than I anticipated. I think I misevaluated there too, in terms of what they might be able to do with him. But, he's not looked good. And mechanically, he's a wreck. And that brings me to another thing, honestly. And, you all know how hesitant I've been in the past to talk about, coaching changes and that sort of thing. But the arm slots and the mechanics that Florida State's quarterbacks have had, and this, I talked about this when Jordan Travis was here too. The mechanics of Florida State quarterbacks are not good. The throwing mechanics that they teach in practice are not good. Right now, DJ Uiagalelei's mechanics are worse than they were when he was a true freshman at Clemson. Now, I give Streeter at Clemson the majority of the blame there. Streeter has ruined multiple quarterbacks in his career, and that's why he's no longer at Clemson. When I used to go down there, and I've talked about this, I think some of you all probably heard me talk about this, 10 years ago. That when I went and visited Clemson's practices more than once, and I watched them working with quarterbacks and all that, I was shocked by what I saw from Brandon Streeter, because I would have done a better job with their quarterbacks than he did in terms of just basic fundamentals. He was ruining those guys. He just happened to get a couple guys you couldn't ruin. He even couldn't ruin them. But DJ, and then also, you had a first year Cade Klubnik that also got Streeter's anti-Midas touch on him as well. So a large portion of that is there. But the fact of the matter is that Florida State's quarterback coaching in terms of basic fundamentals has not made anybody better in the basic fundamentals of throwing the football. Now, in certain things, in terms of Jordan Travis growing as a quarterback and being able to learn to read defenses, learn to play the quarterback position, oh yeah, he got a lot better. Now, most of that was under the current head coach at Arizona State, but he did get a lot better in those areas. But as a thrower, he was slashing, pulling down on the football, doing a lot of things that cost him accuracy and cost him velocity. DJ Uiagalelei, when he throws, it is all arm at this point. He does not engage his core and, rip through. And, the basics of the quarterback throwing motion is it's like cracking a whip, and the handle of the whip is your core going down to your hips. And you have to start the motion there, and then it comes all the way up the core like a wave, and it results with the cracking of the whip at the end, which is the arm, and it goes down the target hallway, straight down the line, and you extend full extension with your arm all the way down the target, toward the target. And if on the other hand, you are taking the arm and you are forcing the arm through and you are pulling down on the football and across your body, that is going to result in disastrous impact on your velocity and on your accuracy. You're going to sail the ball, and you're going to have the ball, kind of pull to the, from the right to left. And you're going to end up with sort of a two-way miss there. And then when you start to compensate for that, it can get really nasty. And that's what Jordan Travis had trouble with last year at times as a thrower. And that's what I'm seeing from DJ Uiagalelei right now. When he's throwing right now, you're not seeing anything delivered through the hips, up through the core, into the arm. He's throwing all arm. And some of you have pointed out when he does step in, he does sometimes step into the throw. But when you step into the throw, one of the things you should look for is the step when a good thrower, when a fundamentally sound thrower steps into the throw, there's a scissor motion from the lower body. The back foot, the plant foot, should not come over the body, should not come over the top of the body and around, sort of stepping through. That should not happen. If that happens, that means that the quarterback has not thrown it correctly. That means that the tension through the body has not led to the necessary deceleration from down through the handle of the whip, as it were. What you should see is what you'll see from, look at Scotty Scheffler as a swinger of the golf club, and people talk about his footwork and all that, but look at how his feet slide out. That back foot slides actually back behind him because he's properly delivering the force from the ground up through the hips, and it creates a kind of scissoring motion where the back foot kind of goes back behind the body and the front foot sort of twists out. That's what you're going to see with really good throwers. You never see that from DJ Uiagalelei. And the result of all of this is that he never throws a spiral. I've not seen him throw more than a couple spirals all season. And that also makes it harder to catch the football if you're a wide receiver. It's much easier to catch a tight spiral that just spins into your gloves than a ball that kind of comes in with all sorts of different tip angles and then hits your hands like a brick, which is what he's throwing. So that actually makes it harder on your receivers as well. All of this comes back to fundamentals. And I frankly expected that they would be able to work with him, or someone would be able to work with him this offseason to get it fixed. I would have done it for free. I could have had him doing it for free. I'm confident of that, but it hasn't happened. And they need to evaluate their situation across every coaching position, across every piece of development in this program, all the way down to who gets recruited, how they evaluate. All of that needs to be evaluated. Am I overreacting? I don't think so after 2 games. And I can guarantee you Mike Norvell is going to be spitting fire and is going to be evaluating all of these things because that guy doesn't like to lose. The question is, how much are they going to be willing to actually make some of the changes that are necessary? And I think that has to start by playing the players who actually are going to show the effort and the discipline to play the way that you want them to play culturally. And that means some of the older guys are going to have to sit until they're willing to actually do that. Some of the guys that make the most NIL are going to have to just sit right there until you're ready to play and you learn from this young guy. And maybe that young guy just keeps playing. You'd rather win some games close and have a team that fights than play some of those spoiled, fat, and happy guys and go out there and lose like that. And I think that's the first decision you have to make. How many guys out here are willing to strain to get there? First decision you have to make. The second decision you have to make is at the quarterback position and how you're going to handle that And if it's going to be DJU, you have to be able to evaluate how you can run your offense better given what he's shown you these first couple weeks. And one thing you can't do, I haven't even gotten to this part. One thing you can't do is you can't go out there and run the football. Let's see, how many times did they run it? Let's see. This is bad podcasting. Ran it 16 times, including 8 from DJ Uiagalelei. You can't have the strongest room on your offense, and you knew this coming into the season, the strongest set of players on your offense, the players that are the best players on your team, supposed to be your running back room. Your running back room got 8 carries from scrimmage. 8. Then you add Toafili getting 3 catches. Now, he had a bad drop early on. Roydell Williams with 2 catches. Cam Davis with 1 catch. So, that's a total of, 14 total touches in your backfield. And then you ask DJ Uiagalelei to throw 42 times. That's a rare situation where Mike Norvell actually abandoned the run. I understand why he did, because they averaged 3.7, 3.3, and 5 yards a carry, respectively, in terms of the 3 running backs that actually are, and then 1 and 0 yards per carry for the 4 running backs that got carries. So I understand why he did it, but at a certain point, you've got to be the team that you are committed to being in terms of identity. That's going to have to start this next week against, I guess it's Memphis. Going to have to start this next week, but, they're going to have to figure some things out. All right, I've talked long enough. It's a plenty scorching hot set of hot takes. We'll go ahead and wrap there. I'm not sure I'm going to do a second look at this in terms of audio. I'm probably going to do a full film breakdown and post that, but I'm not going to do a second thing in terms of audio. I've got a little bit too much on my plate right now, and frankly, I don't want to have to break this down that much, or at least I don't think so. Might end up doing it, might not, but either way, I'm going to get a film breakdown of some sort up there at some point, and then I'll be back with the preview for the next game. But yeah, this was ugly, and it's the sort of thing that has to get you evaluating where you are as you're continuing to build in your program. All right, that'll wrap. Thanks for listening. If you've been enjoying this podcast, please leave a 5-star rating over at Apple Podcasts and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Post and repost episodes on social media and tell a friend. And if you haven't left a review in a while, do it again. It really does help the visibility of the podcast. Before we go, I'd also like to thank my advertising partners once more. That's EPR Creations, Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida, Shenandoah Real Estate in the Research Triangle of North Carolina, Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida, and Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage, serving Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky. You can also stop by the Unconquered Shop at unconqueredpodcast.com, where you can buy stickers, pins, magnets, t-shirts, and other swag. And thanks also to all those supporters over at Patreon, where I post video analysis and field questions for the podcast. I am especially grateful to those above the dynasty level. That is Andrew Garrett, Brian Leininger, Neil Cook, Casey Kidd, Chris Chartrand, Dave Blair, Hector Cartagena, Jack Horton, Jimmy Van, Jonathan Kennedy, Keith Cheney, Lee Caswell, Tyler Kashishke, Vince Calandra, and Bert Bertoldi. You all are far more generous than I deserve. I'm really grateful. Thanks to you all. This has been Unconquered with Doc Staples. I'm your host, Jason Staples. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support. I made this.